The first words out of his mouth were, "You look like a dumpster truck." He didn't whisper it. He didn't slip it under his breath. He said it loud enough for the entire table to hear. My fork froze mid-air. My chest locked tight like the air had been sucked straight out of the room. This was my very first dinner with my boyfriend's family, and his father made sure that the first memory anyone would have of me was cruelty. Silence followed, thick, weighted. My face burned, but I forced myself not to move. That's when it hit me. He had no idea who he was humiliating, and that realization changed everything. 3 weeks before that night, I was already unraveling. I practiced in front of the mirror until my calves ached from standing, shoulders back, chin lifted, smile, but not too wide. Every detail felt like survival. I printed articles about dining etiquette, underlined instructions about forks and napkins like they were exam notes. At one point, I even practiced placing bread on the right plate and water on the left until I could do it blindfolded. I told myself if I could just follow the rules, maybe they'd see me as enough. But rules can't save you from cruelty. Sophia, my best friend, saved me in a different way. She came into my apartment with a garment bag, unzipped it, and pulled out a midnight blue silk gown. "This is the one," she said firmly. "You'll look unstoppable in it." She added her pearl earrings, pressing them into my hand like a promise. "Trust me, no one can ignore you in these." I clutched her words like a lifeline, because when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see unstoppable. I saw every curve I had been taught to hate, every seam that might stretch wrong, every shadow I imagined them staring at. I wanted them to see me, not my body, not my insecurities, not my silence, just me, my laugh, my ideas, the stubborn way I care too much. But deep down, a whisper kept repeating, would it ever be enough? That whisper wasn't new. It started years earlier, in locker rooms where girls whispered about my thighs, and at school, dances where boys dared each other to ask me out as a joke. I thought I'd outgrown it. I thought the sting of being mocked for my body belonged to my teenage years. But standing in front of the mirror in Sophia's gown with pearls against my neck, it all came rushing back. My mom texted me the night before, "Be yourself. That's enough." I stared at her words for so long, the screen went dim. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But as I tugged at the dress and pinched at my waist in the mirror, I didn't see enough. I saw the girl they would laugh at. And when my boyfriend said, "Come with me, I want my family to meet you," I smiled. I nodded. I even kissed him like everything was fine. But inside I thought, if they see me as I really am, they'll never accept me. That fear sat heavy in my chest as the day came closer, like a clock ticking louder and louder, counting down to the moment when I would walk into their world, and I had no idea just how cruel that world would be. The invitation came on a rainy Tuesday. We were curled up on my faded couch, eating takeout noodles straight from the carton. My apartment smelled like soy sauce and old carpet, but to me, it was home. That's when he said it. "My parents are hosting a dinner. I want you to come." He said it like it was nothing, but my heart slammed against my ribs. His parents, his family, the Blackwoods. I tried to hide my panic with a laugh. "A dinner with all of them?" He nodded, his smile soft, but I caught the flicker in his eyes, like he knew what he was asking was bigger than it sounded. And in that second, I wondered, was I being introduced or tested? I knew who they were. Everyone did. Old money, reputation sharpened by whispers. I'd seen their names in the papers, linked to skyscrapers, mergers, scandals tucked neatly away. They were the kind of family people described in lowered voices, like royalty you didn't dare offend. And me? I was the outsider. I looked down at the noodles in my lap, suddenly embarrassed by the grease stains on the couch. "What if they don't like me?" I asked quietly. He squeezed my hand. "They will. How could they not?" But his confidence only made me more uneasy, because if he had to reassure me that hard, it meant he wasn't sure either. That night, lying awake, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just meeting his family. I was stepping into an arena. From that moment, preparation became obsession. Sophia dragged me through department stores, holding dresses against me under fluorescent lights. Price tags made my stomach twist. $400 for a gown I'd wear once? I shook my head. I can't spend money this way. Sophia grabbed my shoulders. Then, borrow mine. Midnight blue. It fits you better than it ever fit me. Her words were meant to soothe, but when I tried the dress on later, I stared at myself in the mirror and thought, do I look elegant or do I look like I'm pretending? The truth? I wasn't choosing a dress. I was choosing armor. The week before the dinner, I practiced walking in Sophia's heels until blisters formed on my feet. I memorized etiquette rules like they were survival codes. Fork on the outside first, napkin folded, no elbows on the table. But no matter how much I practiced, the same thought echoed in my head. What if it's not enough? The night before, my mom called. Her voice was steady, but I knew she could hear the panic in mine. Listen to me, she said. You are smart, you are kind, and you are worthy of respect. Don't let anyone make you feel small. Her words should have grounded me. Instead, they sounded like a warning, because deep down, I knew what I was walking into. And I was right. The next night, I didn't just walk into their dining room. I walked straight into a lion's den. The mansion didn't feel like a house. It felt like a museum curated to remind me I didn't belong. The chandelier overhead threw light so sharp it almost burned. Marble floors gleamed like water I might slip on. Even the air smelled expensive. Perfume, polish, flowers I couldn't name. My heels clicked too loud against the tile. Every sound screamed outsider. A butler took my coat with a glance so swift, I wondered if he judged it by weight alone. My borrowed silk dress suddenly felt thinner, more obvious. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just arriving at dinner. I was arriving as their entertainment. His mother was the first to greet me. Elegant, hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. She kissed her son's cheek, then turned her gaze to me. Her smile was practiced. Perfect teeth, no warmth. And you must be, she paused, letting the silence stretch too long. Jacqueline. Her handshake was quick, limp, like she wanted to wash her hands afterward. She looked me up and down once, eyes catching on the dress. What a bold color choice for spring. The words were polite. The tone was not. I forced a smile. Thank you for having me. But inside, my stomach twisted. That was the first cut. Small, precise. But she wasn't finished. Then came his sister. Younger, pretty in the way that money polishes you. Smooth skin, diamonds that sparkled just enough. She hugged me quickly, too tightly, like she was squeezing me into a shape she wanted. Finally, she said brightly, we've been dying to meet the woman who calmed my brother down. Her words were coated in sugar, but her eyes flicked to my waist. She didn't need to say more. When we walked toward the dining room, she leaned in just enough for me to hear, don't worry, you'll get used to the forks. Everyone does. Her giggle was light, but my ears rang. Every sentence was a test, and I already felt like I was failing. The table was set like a battlefield, crystal glasses lined like soldiers, silverware gleaming in rows. I barely sat down before the questions began. And what do you do? Asked an older cousin, her necklace dripping diamonds. I work at a cafe while finishing my design degree. She tilted her head. How quaint. Another leaned in. And how exactly did you and Alexander meet? At the cafe. A pause. Raised eyebrows. Tight smiles. The kind that say everything without words. I could feel it. Every answer I gave was filed, weighed, and found lacking. And then, silence. He hadn't spoken yet, but his presence filled the table. Maxwell Blackwood, tall, broad shoulders, a man who didn't need to say much to make people fold. He tapped his fork against his glass, just once, and every conversation at the table died instantly. His eyes swept slowly over the table, scanning every guest before locking onto me. My back straightened against the chair, though my pulse hammered. The silence dragged, heavy, suffocating, and I knew he was waiting to strike. His fork tapped against the rim of his crystal glass. Once, twice. The sound cut sharper than any word. The dining room froze. Plates hovered midair. Knives paused against porcelain. Even the servers in the hallway stopped moving. Then, finally, his voice, Low, measured, designed to slice. Dumpster truck. He dropped it like a verdict. For a second, I didn't understand. My fork hung in my hand, heavy as iron. Then the words landed. Dumpster truck. A burn spread up my neck, into my cheeks, until my whole face felt on fire. No one moved. Not my boyfriend, not his mother, not his sister. It was like the entire table had been doused in ice water, everyone frozen in place, waiting to see what I would do. And that silence told me everything. He leaned back, lips curling into a smirk. It wasn't a slip. It wasn't a joke. He wanted me to hear it. He wanted everyone to. Then he laughed, a jagged, humorless sound that split the silence in two. My son seems to like bigger girls now, he continued, waving his fork casually like he was discussing the weather. His gaze slid across me, slow and deliberate, before snapping back to his son. Though I remember your exes, Alexander. Slim, beautiful, the kind of women a family is proud of. The words landed like stones against my chest. I wanted to speak. I wanted to scream, but my throat locked shut. I looked around the table. His wife stiffened, her knuckles pale as she gripped her glass. His daughter's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. And Alexander, the man whose hand had been steady under the table minutes ago, slowly pulled it back. He lowered his eyes to his plate, shoulders curling in as if he could disappear. That was the worst cut of all. Not the insult, the silence. Maxwell wasn't finished. He never was. Ah, those dinners with his exes, he mused, chuckling into his wine. Now those were events to remember. Models, elegance, beauty. Women fit for the Blackwood name. His eyes dragged across me again, slow, savoring my humiliation like fine wine. Every word dripped with poison, feeding on the silence of everyone else. I cut into my vegetables with a fork that shook so badly I thought the whole table would hear it rattling against porcelain, but I kept my face blank. Inside, shame churned like fire. My chest tightened. My eyes stung, tears threatening to rise. But beneath the burn, something colder spread, a flicker of clarity. Because this wasn't just cruelty. It wasn't even about me. This was about control. He was testing the room, seeing if anyone would dare to stop him. And no one did. He thought he had won. What he didn't know was that I was holding the one card that could end him. As his laugh echoed across the table, something inside me shifted. Not anger, not shame, something colder, cleaner, a realization. He thought I was just another guest in his house, a girl he could strip down with words until nothing was left. But what he didn't know, the same woman he mocked over crystal glasses, held the future of his empire in her hands. And the cruelest part? He'd already been begging for my mercy. He just didn't know it yet. I grew up in boardrooms, not ballrooms. My childhood was filled with long tables, endless contracts, the smell of stale coffee clinging to the air. At 12, I was filing binders. By 20, I was reviewing deals myself. Executives leaned in when I spoke. My signature sat beside theirs. My vote carried weight, and lately, one name kept circling those tables: Blackwood Industries. Whispers followed it like smoke, missed deadlines, canceled orders, investors pulling out. Everyone knew it. Their empire was cracking, and every whisper ended with the same words. If they don't land this next contract, that they're finished. That contract, it wasn't with strangers, it was with us. So there I sat, humiliated at his table, mocked for my body like I was nothing, while outside those gilded walls, in conference rooms he thought he ruled, his survival was already in my hands. The irony nearly choked me. Imagine it, being ridiculed by the man whose future depended on your yes or no. I could have said it right then. I could have dropped the truth like a bomb across that perfect table. You're mocking the woman whose vote will decide if your company survives. His smirk would have cracked in an instant, but I didn't. Not yet, because the truth wasn't simple. This wasn't just about me and him. His cruelty was his choice, but the lives tied to him, hundreds of workers with kids, mortgages, bills due, they didn't deserve to be collateral. If I voted no, I wouldn't just be ending him, I'd be ending them. That weight pressed hard, pulling me in two directions. Was my silence protecting them or protecting him? So I stayed quiet, fork in hand, face blank, eyes lowered. Let him think he'd won. Let him keep laughing, because mercy wasn't what I owed him. And silence? Silence wasn't weakness. It was timing. And when the moment came, not at his dining table, but at mine, I would end him with nothing more than a single word. The boardroom wasn't grand. It didn't need to be. The power in that space wasn't chandelier deep. It was signature deep. Long table, leather chairs, water pitchers sweating onto coasters, men and women who measured sentences in risk. He was there first. Maxwell, back straight, jaw tight, a tie he'd probably retied 3 times to look unfazed. He didn't see me at first. Then I stepped into the doorway. His eyes found me. Recognition, confusion, and then fear. The smirk he wore at dinner fell off his face like a mask that had never really fit. Last night he performed for an audience. Today, there was only a verdict. I slid into my seat and opened my folder. No borrowed gown, no pearls, just a blazer that didn't ask permission. For the record, I said, voice even, I'm here as a voting member for this contract. I'm the daughter of the CEO, and our bylaws grant me authority on deals exceeding the threshold. Chairs shifted, pens stopped, counsel glanced up. Across the table, Maxwell's Adam's apple lurched. Let's proceed, I said, on facts. He'd laughed at me over crystal. Here, even air had terms. Exhibit A, I said, sliding a packet forward. Your fulfillment report, the one that claims Phase 2 was completed by the 15th. It wasn't. Satellite logistics timestamps show trucks idle for 3 consecutive days. A director skimmed, frowned. Another scribbled a note. Exhibit B, email trail from your operations lead. We'll roll the numbers forward and clean it next quarter. Date stamped, CC'd to you. His mouth opened, closed. Exhibit C, notice of noncompliance from the state regulator. You reported, resolved. It wasn't. The remediation window expired. Numbers don't tremble, people do. Exhibit D, I said, laying down photographs. Site inspection, disposal drums in a restricted zone, time code, GPS. A murmur rolled the length of the table. And Exhibit E, I finished, placing the last file. Vendor invoice for consulting. Same day, an inspection suddenly cleared. Cross-check the account number with the inspector's LLC. Maxwell's fingers tightened on his folder until the cardboard bowed. A sheen of sweat climbed his forehead under the recessed lights. At dinner, he measured me by inches. Here, we measured him by evidence. He cleared his throat, aiming for casual and landing on brittle. We've already addressed these administrative hiccups. If you'll allow... Language matters, Mr. Blackwood, I said. A missed deadline is a delay. A falsified report is a lie. He tried a smile, the same one that had cut at dinner, but it slid off, unmoored. You're emotional, he said softly. Let's reset. When power starts to lose, it calls clarity emotion. I folded my hands. Reset, I repeated, tasting the word he'd used like an eraser. At your dinner, you called me a dumpster truck. You compared me to your son's exes like I was a defective shipment. Silence thickened. Even the air conditioner seemed to hold its breath. Partnerships are not just numbers, I said. They're respect, compliance, and how leaders behave when they think no one will hold them accountable. Across the table, counsel set down his pen and didn't pick it up again. Last night, he performed dominance. Today, he watched consequence. I slid my final page to the center of the table. My recommendation is denial. Effective immediately. We will not proceed with this contract. A director seconded. Another noted. The secretary's keys clicked, the sound of history being typed in real time. Maxwell leaned forward, voice cracking through his teeth. Listen, we can renegotiate terms. A concession on margin. A revised schedule. Whatever you want. Not whatever, I said. Only what's right. And this isn't. He'd expected me to break. The only thing breaking was his leverage. He tried again. Lower. I said things I shouldn't have. That's on me. Don't punish the people who work for me. I held his gaze. I've been thinking about them since before your dinner. They are not collateral for your ego. We will support worker placement if your company restructures. What we won't do is fund malpractice. His chair scraped as he half stood, then stopped, an instinct to loom dying in a room that didn't care how tall he was. "Please," he said, the words small and astonishing in his mouth. "We can reset." The man who laughed at me now asked me for mercy. He got policy. I closed my folder. "The minutes will reflect the vote. Our council will deliver formal notice by end of day." I stood. He didn't. Couldn't. The door handle was cool under my palm. As it turned, I looked back once, not for him, but for the girl who'd sat under a chandelier and swallowed heat. She's gone, I thought, and I am not who you named. I walked out. He didn't follow. By morning, headlines would, and gravity would do the rest. By morning, his name wasn't whispered. It was shouted in headlines. Blackwood Industries, environmental fraud, bribery, corruption. The stock plunged 20% by noon. By the end of the week, nearly 40%. Investors bailed. Clients froze. Contracts. Federal regulators circled like sharks. Inside his empire, silence replaced swagger. Executives whispered in hallways. Assistants walked faster, heads low. No one said his name above a murmur, as if speaking it would bring the walls down quicker. And for the first time, Maxwell's weapon, fear, belonged to everyone but him. But the sharper collapse wasn't in the papers. It was in his house. His wife stood by him. Yes, but with eyes fixed anywhere but his. His daughter's disgust hung in every word she spoke. Dinner tables turned cold. No laughter, no chatter. Just silence, cracking like ice. The empire he thought was armor now suffocated his own family. He'd once humiliated me in front of them. Now he sat, humiliated among them. People asked if I celebrated, if I opened champagne when the story broke. I didn't. There's no victory in watching innocent workers lose their jobs. No rush in knowing hundreds of families now lived under the shadow of his greed. Instead, guilt pressed heavier than satisfaction, because while the world called me strong, I looked in the mirror and saw the weight of every paycheck lost, every child's future shaken. Victory doesn't always feel like triumph. Sometimes it feels like debris. Alexander didn't cling to ashes. He resigned, clean, then built something new, a foundation for honest work, for rebuilding what greed destroyed. He even hired the displaced. He looked at me once, quietly, and said, "Not all bloodlines rot the same." And that's when I realized the real fallout wasn't his empire collapsing. It was me standing taller, owning the body he mocked, owning the silence he mistook for weakness. He thought he'd reduced me to nothing. Instead, he gave me the ground to rise. He called me a dumpster truck. He thought those words would bury me, but words only have the power you give them, and I gave them none. Instead, I gave them back. Because here's what he never understood. Garbage gets thrown out, but gold is dug up, fought for, cherished. That night, he tried to make me feel like garbage, but he only revealed what I'd been all along. Gold. So let them laugh, let them underestimate. Sometimes the people who try to break you end up handing you your sharpest weapon. Because in the end, his insult didn't define me, it freed me.